All right, back to our exit interviews. We're going to go with Ridly Greig. Ridly Greig obviously had a highlight reel moment this season with the empty net goal against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But overall, I thought this was a very good get your feet wet campaign for Ridly Greig. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair, Ross. Before last season, he only got 20 games in the NHL, and that was broken up into two stints. He had a bit of time, then he went back to Belleville, then he came back later on in the year. So, not really consistently in the NHL this season. 72 games, 13 goals, 13 assists for 26 points. But what you got to love, Ross, is that plus 10 that Ridly Greig finished the season with. And he was like plus 14, 15 for most of the year. I think he just had a bit of a dip at the end of the year along with the rest of the Ottawa Senators. But for Ridly Greig, I think he's getting a bit of the Shane Pinto treatment, unfortunately, where due to injuries, most notably Josh Norris injury, he's been up and down this lineup, and he hasn't really been able to find a spot where he can stay and work on being that type of role player. I think ideally we're going to see him in a winger position on a third line consistently next year, along with Matthew Joseph and Shane Pinto. I think that'd be a great line, in my opinion. But Ridly Greig definitely, this was a developmental year for him. I don't think we can say it was a huge success, but I'm also not going to say it was any kind of failure as well. I think this is right around where you want Ridly Greig to be in his first full NHL season.
And he got an opportunity to play with some great players. Think back to the start of the season where Vladimir Tarasenko was his right winger. That line with Matthew Joseph was super hot right out of the gate. They were one of the hottest lines in hockey for quite a while there in terms of goals for, goals against when they were out on the ice. And I think then if you look at it, and one of the most, in terms of expected goals, the one of the best lines this season for the Ottawa Senators featured Ridly Greig on it, playing with with Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux. Those guys were 69% expected goals percentage through 20 games, 66 minutes of time on ice together. So there's a lot that Ridly Greig has learned with kind of going through the ups and downs and the marathon that is an 82 game season. I know he missed 10 of them, but to me, this was perfect, where it's like third line has to play up a little bit more. And like, he had some rough stretches. There's no doubt about it. After he had that empty net goal, he then, I think he scored the next game, if not 2 games after. And then he went ice cold, had a little bit of a push at the end, but ice cold at the end of the season. That's fine. To me, now he has 72 games of consistent NHL video to go off of throughout the summer and get stronger. And people have to remember, this guy doesn't turn 22 years old until August 8th. Same day that Roby Arventi turns 22. And people still see him as an up-and-coming prospect, right? Like, it's easy to see them once they become NHLers that it's like, okay, now, like, where's the production? But this guy, and again, this guy, his player comparable, you could, I mean, some people who watch 90s, 2000s hockey, like, he could be a Travis Green. I bet you Travis Green is going to love coaching Ridly Greig.
Yeah, definitely. If he could put his Leafs fandom aside, and if he wasn't too upset with that slap shot into the empty net, if you're watching on YouTube, that's the picture Ross and I decided to use for Ridly Greig here. Ross, I have a question for you, and a question for everyone listening and watching here, because I'm very intrigued with this. Let's start at next season. Next season, Ridly Greig is a winger or a centerman?
I think he's a lot better as a centerman.
Okay, but that wasn't the question. Will he spend most of his time on the wing or at center? Now, obviously, this is an impossible question to really answer because it depends on how the offseason goes here. But I'll reframe it this way. Where do you think he would thrive better as
third
a
line center?
Okay, but you have Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, and Shane Pinto, who, knock on wood, will all be healthy at the start of the season.
Yeah, Josh Norris is playing wing for me on the second line.
Okay, well, we can get into this later. I was thinking about bringing that up as well. So that's an interesting approach that definitely,
I think if you have Tim Stützle, Shane Pinto, Ridly Greig, and then a legitimate veteran fourth line center. I'm sorry, Mark Kaslik, it was fun. I don't know if we can do it again. We'll see. If he's 13th forward, sure, that's cool. But I think they need They need like not even like a sexy name, like a Nick Dowd or like just a guy who can be like, I want a guy with at least 500 NHL games as a centerman on the team next year. Okay. I don't know if it's as a third line or fourth line center, bottom six, call it a bottom six, but Ridley's not playing on the fourth line. So there's a lot to unpack there, because if they are trying to take another step, are you really going to have 22-year-old, and 21-year-old as your three centermen? Well, not that Josh Norris is much older, although he is obviously, I think, 2 or 3 years older than all those guys. So he's probably 25. It's going to be interesting to see where they play him, because I think you might put him on the wing. But I think as a future, like his career, he'll play more center than the wing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. What was his face-off percentage this year? Was sitting at 43, right? That's another thing. Where do you need to put him with a Claude Giroux type where they're going to take all the face-offs for him, or most of them, at least for the start? I think he's going to be bulking up this summer. I hope so, at least. I hope Ridley comes into camp, and I hope he's top 5 in fitness testing.
Yeah, well, Ross, we already know last season during the offseason, we had everybody joking around. Anytime you saw Ridley Greig, he had a protein shake in his hand and he's trying to get that weight up. So I think definitely that for Ridley Greig to play the style of game he wants to play in the NHL, I agree with you. I think a big part of that is he's going to have to bulk up, because it's not just going to be Morgan Rielly going after him. Like Ridley Greig is such a shift disturber that he's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, which is good if you're an Ottawa Senators fan or Ottawa Senators player. But he's going to have to back it up, and some extra pounds, a little extra size would do him some good there.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on Ridley Greig's last season, expectations going forward, and do you see him as a centerman or on the wing?